Welcome back to Share Science, the weekly science brief for April 20th, 2026. I'm Curie.
And I'm Derek.
Did you know that bacteria can literally explode to spread antibiotic resistance? It's not just a metaphor, it's a real biological mechanism. And that's just one of the stories we're diving into today.
That's wild. And it's just the tip of the iceberg this week. We've got groundbreaking research on obesity treatments, a surprising delay in the ozone layer's recovery, a new theory about how the Grand Canyon was formed, and glaciers that can suddenly surge with devastating consequences. Where do you want to start?
Let's kick things off with the obesity story, because it's such a hot topic right now. Researchers at the University of Oklahoma have been studying a natural hormone called FGF21. Fibroblast growth factor 21. And they found that it can reverse obesity in mice by acting directly on the brain. What's fascinating is that it works in a completely different way than the GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy that have been dominating headlines.
That's a bold claim considering how transformative GLP-1 drugs have been. They've redefined obesity treatment, but they're not without their downsides: muscle loss, nausea, and the need for continuous use to maintain the benefits.
Exactly. And that's where FGF21 stands out. Both it and GLP-1 drugs target the hindbrain, specifically the parabrachial nucleus, which is a key hub for regulating hunger and energy balance. But while GLP-1 drugs primarily suppress appetite, FGF21 raises the body's metabolic rate. It essentially makes your body burn more energy, even when you're at rest.
That's a pretty fundamental difference, and it seems like it could address one of the biggest criticisms of GLP-1 drugs: the loss of muscle mass alongside fat loss.
Right. Muscle is metabolically active tissue. It's what keeps your resting metabolic rate up. In the mouse studies, FGF21 led to fat loss while better preserving lean muscle tissue. That's a huge deal for long-term health outcomes because losing muscle mass can have serious consequences for metabolism, mobility, and overall health.
And there's also a connection to liver disease, isn't there?
Absolutely. FGF21 is already being studied in clinical trials for a condition called MASH, metabolic dysfunction-associated steatohepatitis, which is a severe form of fatty liver disease. Since MASH is closely tied to obesity and insulin resistance, this hormone could potentially tackle multiple issues at once. It's like a domino effect in reverse. Addressing one problem could help resolve others.
But this is still in the early stages, right? We're talking about mouse studies, so it's not something we'll see in clinics anytime soon.
That's true. We're a long way from seeing this in widespread use. But the mechanistic insight is what's important. It opens up a whole new direction for drug design, targeting the brain to increase metabolic rate rather than just suppressing appetite. If you're curious, search for FGF21 Obesity Hindbrain Hormone 2026 to find the original research.
All right, let's move on to story 2, which takes us from the human body to the atmosphere. This one's about the ozone layer, and it's a bit of a wake-up call, isn't it?
It really is. The Montreal Protocol, signed in 1987, is often hailed as the most successful environmental agreement in history. It phased out chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs, which were tearing a hole in the ozone layer. And it worked. The ozone layer has been recovering. But researchers at MIT have found a loophole that's delaying full recovery by up to 7 years.
A loophole? What kind of loophole are we talking about here?
The Montreal Protocol banned CFCs as end products, things like refrigerants and aerosol propellants. But it allowed them to be used as feedstocks, which are raw materials in industrial chemical processes. The assumption was that these chemicals would be entirely consumed during manufacturing and wouldn't leak into the atmosphere.
But that assumption turned out to be wrong?
Exactly. The researchers found that these feedstock chemicals are leaking at rates much higher than anyone anticipated. Industrial containment isn't as airtight as regulators assumed when the exemption was written.
And the impact of this leakage?
It's significant. It could delay the ozone layer's recovery by up to 7 years. That's 7 more years of elevated UV radiation, increased skin cancer risk, and ecosystem disruption. Plus, ozone chemistry is tied to the broader climate system, so there are additional feedback effects.
It's a reminder that even the best environmental agreements need ongoing scientific monitoring. Assumptions from decades ago don't always hold up over time.
Exactly. It underscores the importance of vigilance. If you want to learn more, search for Montreal Protocol Feedstock Loophole Ozone MIT 2026.
On to story 3, and this one is both fascinating and a little terrifying. It's about bacteria, specifically how they spread antibiotic resistance genes. The new discovery? Bacteria can literally explode to spread resistance.
It's wild, isn't it? Antibiotic resistance is already one of the most pressing global health challenges. And now we've learned about a mechanism we didn't fully understand before. Researchers found that bacteria can burst themselves open to release gene transfer agents, or GTAs.
GTAs. What are those exactly?
They're tiny virus-like particles that bacteria use to package and deliver snippets of their own DNA, including resistance genes. It turns out, GTAs are ancient viral invaders that bacteria have repurposed over evolutionary time.
And the new finding is about how these GTAs get released?
Yes, the researchers identified a set of genes called LipABC that act as a kind of detonation switch. When triggered, these genes cause the bacterial cell to rupture, releasing a flood of GTAs into the environment. Those GTAs then infect neighboring bacteria, spreading resistance genes far and wide.
That's a pretty alarming picture. It means resistance isn't just spreading through reproduction or direct contact. It's being actively dispersed.
Exactly. This discovery changes how we think about containing antibiotic resistance, especially in clinical and agricultural settings. If you want to explore this further, search for Gene Transfer Agents LipABC Antibiotic Resistance Bacteria 2026.
Moving on to story 4, we're heading to the Grand Canyon. New research is challenging the traditional story of how it formed.
That's right. The classic explanation is that the Colorado River carved the canyon slowly over millions of years. But new evidence suggests that a catastrophic lake overflow may have been the initial trigger.
A lake overflow, how does that work?
Researchers believe that before the Colorado River cut its modern course, water pooled into a large lake or series of lakes in the region. As the water accumulated, pressure built up until a natural dam gave way, unleashing a massive flood that carved an initial channel. The Colorado River then deepened that channel over millions of years.
So it's a combination of a sudden, dramatic event followed by slower processes.
Exactly. And this idea isn't unprecedented. Similar catastrophic floods carved the channeled scablands in Washington state during the last ice age. It's a reminder that geological processes aren't always slow and steady. Sometimes they're explosive.
If you're curious, search for Grand Canyon Lake Overflow, Colorado River Formation 2026 to read the research and the counter-arguments, because this finding is still contested.
Finally, Story 5 takes us to glaciers. We often think of glaciers as slowly retreating due to climate change, but this story is about a different phenomenon: surging glaciers.
What's a surging glacier?
Under normal conditions, glaciers creep downhill very slowly. But a surging glacier can suddenly accelerate, moving hundreds of feet per day. This happens when meltwater builds up at the glacier's base, reducing friction and causing the entire mass to lurch forward.
And the risks?
Enormous. A surging glacier can breach glacial lakes, triggering floods or send ice crashing into rivers. The new study identified 3,100 glaciers worldwide that either exhibit this behavior or have the conditions for it.
And climate change might actually increase the risk of surges in the near term?
That's the counterintuitive part. While glaciers are losing mass overall, warming-driven meltwater could make surges more likely in the short term. It's a pressing issue for communities living downstream of these glaciers.
The takeaway here is the need for better monitoring and early warning systems. If you want to learn more, search for Surging Glaciers Flood Risk 3100 2026.
And that's our 5 stories for the week. From obesity research to the ozone layer, bacteria, the Grand Canyon, and glaciers. It's been a whirlwind.
It really has. Until next time, stay curious.
See you next week.